to QI, where tonight we're gallivanting round the globe with G for geography. And joining me from the four corners of the earth are the king of the jungle, Jimmy Carr. The queen of the desert, Jo Brand. The prince of Port Talbot, Rob Brydon. And the man in the moon, Alan Davis. So, with that in mind, let's hear their global warnings. Jimmy goes... Rob goes... Yes, you do. Jo goes... And Alan goes...
40s, Cromarty, Norfolk Sierra, Southwark Sierra, Chingford, Loughton, Woodford Green. Mainly poor, veering strangely. -75, occasionally rock all.
Right. Now, tell me, what ruins over 300,000 British car journeys each year?
Radio 1.
Very good. Very good. 300,000 British car journeys.
Is it kids in the back going, "Oh, we're nearly there yet?" And you go, "No, put the hood back on your head." So soon.
Oh, I'm sorry. You were barely warmed up.
The sat-nav sending you down into a field.
Basically, you are right. 300,000 insurance claims for serious road traffic incidents or accidents are put down to sat-nav these days.
We were in the car, my girlfriend genuinely said, "Where would we be without sat-nav?" Thanks for that, love.
That's
added
very
value.
good.
Yeah.
Well, there was a touring acting group whose pink Mercedes van, they had to be rescued off the roof of it by helicopter because the sat-nav basically directed them down into a ford.
Yeah, but how much
stream.
of a div would you have to be to actually see it ahead of you?
Well, it might have been night. They're in the countryside. You go down a lane, and the lane turns out to be.
Yeah, but it's quite good these days because cars have got headlights.
It's a fair point.
She's got a very persuasive voice.
She has. I call her my navigatrix.
I've had an idea. I know this isn't Dragon's Den, it's QI, but I've had an idea,
Yeah, go on.
which is you get sat-nav, yeah, but you print it out into a booklet that you can just flick through.
What would you call it?
Satless.
Maybe a sat-nav.
A satless.
What I don't like about sat-nav is when it interrupts the radio. You'll be listening to a very nice thing on the radio, maybe a play or something.
Yes.
And the voice, of course, cuts over the radio always at a crucial moment. So you'll be getting to the climax of the play. And I tell you, David, the reason that we never had children is turn left in 40 yards.
Because you do quite a lot of voiceovers generally. Have you been asked to do one of the... Because you'd be very good if you did that voice of a little man trapped inside a box.
Oh, yes. Do your man who's trapped in a box or your American radio set that you swallowed.
Go. Ready?
Where are you? I don't know where you were.
It's a small thing, Stephen.
Actually, people who do sat-nav voices, you know, John Cleese does one. And,
Does he? I
yeah.
thought that was an urban myth.
No, he does.
You can record it onto your own sat-nav.
You can also do your own.
I've done that on ours.
Oh.
I didn't tell my wife, and then she went for a drive, and it was me going, "Go left! Go left!"
She went into a
Come on!
No.
Right here!
No wonder there's so many accidents. Apparently, the favourite sat-nav voices are Nigella Lawson.
Joanna Lumley.
Well, you'd think Joanna Lumley. The ones I got are Billy Connolly and Julie Walters.
Billy
there.
Connolly?
Yeah.
He's done it.
I know. The least favourite, see if you can have a guess.
Nick
Brian
Griffin.
Sewell.
Right. You know Simon Cowell.
Hitler?
Yeah, I think he'd have kitsch value. Catherine Tate.
Are these impressions of... They're not actually... Simon Cowell hasn't gone into a studio and recorded it, surely.
Well, I suppose all he's got to do is left, right, straight on, and they fiddle about with it.
Yeah, basically, they just do a few. Yeah. And Baroness Thatcher is the... But there's also a Julia...
Right.
There's a Julian Clary pack, too, apparently, which is advertised as with free Dale Winton voice and alerts.
You are passing a wooded area. the car.
Well, now then. But yeah, there have been several disasters. Perhaps the most extreme one was a Syrian lorry driver transporting luxury cars from Turkey to Gibraltar, who was diverted to the Grimsby area. 1,600 miles out of his way, because there is a Gibraltar Point off Lincolnshire, South Yorkshire. So he just blindly, not blindly, but he obediently followed it, and was seen trying to drive into the North Sea, and that's when he was stopped. And of course, a lot of villages' lives are ruined by being cut-throughs.
Friends of mine back in Wales, quite a few of them have got Welsh, so it's not a famous voice, but it's a Welsh sat-nav, which basically goes, you know...
In Welsh language?
No, just a Welsh attitude,
Oh, no.
Welsh approach to life, or death.
Yeah.
Turning coming up now in about 40 yards, get ready for it. Getting a bit closer now, get ready, here it comes. Oh, you plank, you've missed it. Right, do a Yui. Do it, look, do it, oh... Pull over, attach a hose pipe to the exhaust and just end it all. And that's a very popular one.
Well, apparently, driver distraction contributes to a quarter of all accidents, it seems, according to ROSPA, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents. And using a handheld mobile or a sat-nav is about equal, apparently. So, while we're on the subject of directions, who is to the right of Genghis Khan? Yeah.
It's just quite frightening. Every taxi driver I've ever met. If it's a dinner party, girl, boy, Mrs. Khan.
Mrs. Khan. Well, there were 500 Mrs. Khans.
500?
He married 500.
Oh, that's a sitcom waiting to be made,
He
isn't
had
it?
he had so many children that actually they recently did a test of Central Asian males, and they found that 8% of all Central Asian males are related to a common ancestor about 1,000 years ago, which may well be Genghis Khan.
So do you think in 1,000 years' time they'll be talking the same way about Russell Brand?
It's highly possible.
I quite fancy that being one of 500. At least you'd only have to have sex with him every year and a half.
That's true, but he might well have chopped your head off afterwards or something. He was rather violent, as you know. And in death, he was violent too, in a weird kind of way. Because what we're talking about is when you say, I literally mean who is on the right...
Oh, you mean buried alongside him?
Yeah.
Is he buried with relatives or with victims or
well, the
plunder?
thing is, in Mongolian tradition, when a great ruler like that, and there was no great ruler as great as Genghis Khan, obviously, he had to be anonymous. No one could know. So this gave them a real problem. According to Marco Polo, 20,000 people were killed to keep his burial place secret. All the slaves who excavated the grave were killed by soldiers, and then all the soldiers who killed the slaves were killed. That's how bad it was, until they suddenly realised they were in danger of killing everybody who knew where the grave was. So what they did, and this is really peculiar, they realised, right, camels have got long memories, okay? So this is really unpleasant. A suckling baby camel, they killed in front of its mother by the grave where they were going to bury Genghis Khan, right? And then they took the mother away, and they buried the baby camel next to Genghis Khan. So that's who's to the right of Genghis Khan. And every year...
Oh, I was going to guess that.
Every year, the camel would remember exactly where the grave was, because it knew exactly where its little baby was. It's very sad.
That's a lovely story.
Yeah, but then the camel
Tell
died.
my daughters that tonight. Get them off to sleep. Here you go, I've got a lovely story about a camel.
Then the camel died.
And the camel died.
And then no one knew where he was buried. So that was unfortunate. Tell me about Mongols, though.
The Mongol hordes.
Mongol hordes, yeah. 2 million people the Mongol hordes amounted to, but they managed to kill an estimated 50 million of their enemy. Staggeringly savage. And what gave them the advantage, principally?
They had lasers.
They did have weapons.
Photon torpedoes.
They had weapons that were ahead of the time.
They did. They had bows that were short. They weren't huge long bows. They were short. You could carry them in the saddle, because it was the riding, it was the horses. They introduced horses to...
They were bloody good at riding,
Brilliant.
weren't they?
They would ride for
used
days.
To jump across.
That's right. They wouldn't even go to the loo. I mean, they would go to the loo while jumping from one horse to the other. They stayed in the saddle for day after day.
In the air?
They keep in the air.
I mean, if you mistimed that, that's bad luck
Yeah.
for one of the horses.
Would you not love
sorry,
to
I've
see
shat
that?
on this one.
jumping from horse to horse and doing a little wee. That's a magnificent thing.
It is, isn't it? But, yeah, it was their horsemanship and their bows and arrows that did it. And just their violence, their desire and or happiness at killing people. But they were a great big empire.
They're not so angry anymore?
Mongols, no, they seem rather cheerful.
I mean,
yes.
they don't have a reputation now, do they, for hoarding?
No. No, they're lovely people. Very charming. Very nice.
They don't hoard anymore. They've got cash in the attic now. It's all gone.
They're very fine. But anyway, Genghis Khan is buried next to a baby camel, which acted like a sort of 13th century sat-nav, guiding people back to his tomb. Now, how did the teacup change the course of Chinese history?
Did they used to have tea just in their hands like that?
No. They invented it, you might almost say...
We're going to have to invent something for this.
They invented it so early that it was a disadvantage. It held back the course of Chinese history.
When they were building the Great Wall, was everyone going, right, cuppa? Yeah, we'll have a couple. I had to make 5,000 cups of tea, and then, well, the day's over. We've got nothing.
They did, unlike the
Is
Europeans.
it because now, is it something to do with metal and ceramics, or is it because they invented it and they didn't therefore invent other things that would have come before it?
Yeah, that's the point. In our culture, we came to China much later, which we got from them, hence calling it China.
So we have bronze. And
we also like wine, which they never drank in China. And wine, the colour is very beautiful, and we developed a technology for containing wine, glass. With glass came lens grinding, came telescopes and microscopes. And through spectacles, intellectuals and scientists had an extra 15 to 20 years of reading an active life, and further, all the way through to the invention of medical science. Flasks, beakers, retorts, because it's chemically neutral glass, doesn't react to anything that's in it, and the Chinese had no glass made in all of China from the 14th century right up to the 19th century.
And no mirrors either.
And therefore no mirrors. So, in fact, just because they were satisfied with the teacup and didn't bother this incredibly ingenious race, who would otherwise have invented so many other things, and did invent so many other things, were the one thing they couldn't do. And electronics used glass for valves, and so on.
The irony is, a lot of them prefer coffee.
Yeah!
Go figure.
What do they do for a window?
They used paper.
Paper's rubbish for a window.
Paper, card,
and you can't see through it.
And they had dark houses. I mean, that's another thing.
Dark houses.
Well,
Dark houses, yeah, because they haven't got any light bulbs either. These people are useless.
Well,
what about lanterns? And turn a lantern out in the dark.
They had Chinese lanterns like that.
Paper lanterns, that's the worst invention yet.
But
They could always let off a few indoor fireworks, though, couldn't they?
They had fireworks,
yeah.
But they invented the plastic tub for keeping rice in. Centuries ago, and those tin foil ones with the cardboard lid.
Yes.
So they were way ahead in some areas.
They clearly were. Anyway, there you are. That's China and glass. The course of Chinese history changed by their preference for tea, which meant they never bothered to develop glass. Now, where would you find the world's driest lake, the world's smallest mountain range, and the world's wettest desert?
Are they all in the same place?
They are in the same
Right, we're looking at America, aren't we?
We are in America. You can tell, really, the
we're
big giveaway.
in the Midwest of America. We are in...
Oh, start on the left of our triptych. Where's that...
Salt Lake Flats?
It's the biggest and driest lake in the world, and it is a salt lake, and it's so flat that it's very useful for something. So useful that it's...
The land speed record, Anthony Hopkins, world's fastest Indian. I'm going to break the world speed record. I'm going to do it in this car. Here I go. Look at me now. Look at me go. I'm playing a New Zealander. Sometimes my accent will be like that, and other times it'll be something else altogether. Doesn't matter. I'm Anthony Hopkins. Doesn't matter. Do what I want. Do what I want.
Now, what if he was trapped in a box?
Oh, you are wonderful. I'll choose you as a companion for a walking tour or to be trapped in a lift with any day, Rob. But yes, you're right. And there's a name. The name of that particular lake is given to a famous Triumph motor bicycle. Does that help you give its name?
Oh.
Bonneville.
Bonneville.
Oh,
it's the Bonneville, yes. Bonneville Lake. And it's so flat you can see the curvature of the Earth on it.
Wow.
And
Well,
it
so
is
not
ideal.
Literally curved.
So yes, the salt flat is the driest lake.
Why do they
in
call
the
it a
world.
lake? Because it's not a lake anymore.
Well, it's a dried-up lake. Its shape and all its features are dominated by its ex-lakeness.
Except for the water.
Except for
Everything
its lack
except
of
for the
water, yeah. Mediterranean was once the biggest dry lake in the world in the late Miocene era.
The water came rushing in over the Straits of Gibraltar.
Yeah, quite right. 6 million years ago.
I know this because I saw it in the Plymouth Aquarium.
That must have been fabulous for the sort of all the towns around sort of Spain and Portugal that rely on tourism. Must have been a hell of a year.
Whoa,
When
absolutely.
that just kind of came in, they went, "This is fantastic." Finally, these jet skis are going to get an outing.
It's true. Anyway, yeah, the rock of Gibraltar, which joined North Africa to Spain, crumbled away, and the water from the Atlantic flooded in, and there you were. There was the Mediterranean Sea. And all the fish in the Mediterranean are descended from Atlantic types.
You mentioned the Rock of Gibraltar. People think of monkeys and the Rock of Gibraltar. Yes.
Good, excellent
Yes.
point.
Yeah. Is that it?
No.
No. Right. What else do we know about Barbary apes?
Nothing.
Oh, okay.
It was it.
So the Barbary monkeys, which are called miscalled Barbary apes, but they are actually Barbary monkeys. You're quite right to call them monkeys. Thank you, thank you. Smallest mountain range was the midmost of our triptych of photographs.
So where's that?
That's not far away.
Well, isn't that a hill?
Incidentally, Bonneville was in which state?
Utah.
Utah is exactly right, yes. And we're moving a little further to what's the capital of California?
Yay.
State capital of California.
No, I know where it is. It's where the university is, isn't it? Isn't it? Where he goes in the graduate, where he goes in the car? Dustin Hoffman drives there to see Elaine.
It's
Elaine!
Sacramento.
Elaine! Elaine! I'm doing Dustin Hoffman. Elaine!
Oh, God, you're trying to seduce me, Mrs. Robinson.
I'm sorry, Steve. Has he had a stroke?
So the smallest mountain range?
The smallest mountain
The Hoffman
range.
Mountains.
We were talking, yes, Sacramento is the
Sacramento.
state capital of California.
How is that not a hill, then? What defines a mountain?
That's a good question. But in the US, anything that rises 1,000 feet from base to apex is a mountain. In the UK, the official definition is 600 metres above sea level, a little less than 2,000 feet. In this mountain range, they're 2,117 feet, but it's only something like 10 miles in diameter, the whole range.
One thinks of that wonderful British film starring that great British actor Hugh Grant, the Englishman who went up a hill but came down a mountain.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah. Thank you. And so...
Hang on a second, Stephen. I have a feeling. Do you do Hugh Grant?
Gosh, so I went up a hill and sort of came down a bloody mountain. Oh, gosh.
I had a feeling we might be going there.
Very good. Excellent. And moving on, the wettest desert.
The North Sea.
You see, now you have to stick to the definition
Still
of a
in
desert.
America.
Still in America.
So what's the definition of a desert?
A desert is a place...
Well, there's virtually no rainfall. Is that right? Is that
Well,
in the
there's
definition?
quite a lot of rainfall here, but there's a moisture deficit. It loses more moisture than it...
So it's kind of got a holy floor.
Yeah. It qualifies... It's the Sonoran Desert, or the...
Oh.
In California. The western states of the USA have many mighty unusual features, including the driest lake, the smallest mountain range, and the wettest desert in the world. Now, in 1851, James Wilde installed a 60-foot-high scale model of the Earth in the middle of London, including all the land masses and the seas and the mountains built to scale. What was the best direction to see it from?
What about from inside?
Yes, is the right answer.
Oh, was it made of glass?
Yes. It was a perfect representation of the Earth from inside. Wow! It was one of the wonders of the age. It was there in Leicester Square between 1851 and 1862. A visitor said, I visited several times. I never met with anyone who wasn't delighted with it or didn't find it most instructive. And I don't know if you can see the details there. The top left there, you can probably see Scandinavia and Britain just at the very top left, about sort of between 10 and 11 o'clock.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? What's fascinating about it is that it's obviously you're inside it. So it's like an inverse of how the
Yeah.
world really is.
Yeah.
And yet, one of the odd things about the way maps and projections are is that a globe is an accurate representation of what we think the world is. It's round. But that one, being inside it, is exactly the same. In other words, if you were to take
Yes.
a piece of paper
Yes.
and you were to draw the world and do this and look at the piece of paper on a cylinder, you'd say, OK, right, that's kind of like how it is. But it would look identical if you took the same piece of paper and looked at it when it was concave rather than convex.
So what happened to it then?
Well, sadly, it came down after 12 years. The lease on the ground was expired, whoever owned Leicester Square.
Lease on the earth?
The lease on the ground on which it stood.
So high
So
rents
it's now
in the
the
West
centre
End.
of Leicester Square, whatever.
It sounds like a brilliant thing to build again.
Wouldn't it be wonderful? But it's a very successful. It was there to coincide with the Great Exhibition in Hyde Park. But it gave everybody joy and pleasure, as you can see. And they were, as in all those drawings, someone pointing like that. But it's a very
Top
fine...
hats.
And
We'll
top
wear
hats.
top hats to go inside the earth.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? Anyway, there it was, a man called Wilde. His great globe in Leicester Square. And it was an enormous triumph. Scale model of the world viewed from the inside. Let's try something simpler. Where did the Arctic Highlanders get their cutlery from?
Sheffield, that's where you get your cutlery from.
Ah,
isn't it?
well, the Sheffield.
From Nordic.
IKEA.
So when you say, what was it, northern...
Well, that's the clue. Arctic Highlanders was the...
Do you mean Eskimos?
We now call them Inuit polar Eskimos, yeah. A man called Ross, after whom the Ross Sea is named, he was the first European to encounter. And this particular tribe of Inuits, 200 of them he met. It was an extraordinary meeting. They thought they were the only people on the planet. They didn't know there were any other people in the world.
It's very much like that in Essex.
It's like that. It's rather touching, though, isn't it? And they saw him, they'd never seen anyone else. But they had cutlery.
Metal cutlery.
Metal cutlery.
Where did it come from?
Where did it come from?
Aliens.
Oh, was it...
Aliens is not a bad answer.
Was it one of the guys that went up there to the North Pole and just left a bunch of stuff and they found a bunch and went...
No. This man, Ross, was the first European ever to go up close to the North Pole. I'm talking a long time ago. Look, see? I'm talking 1818, before anyone had been to the North Pole.
And they had proper knives and...
Pretty proper. They were a mixture of bone and metal.
Or was it mail
But
order?
they didn't have the technology...
Did they find them? Did they excavate them or something?
They didn't have the
Did they come
technology
across
to smelt metal, to make metal. They had no knowledge about iron ore or anything of the kind.
And they thought they were the only people...
They thought they were the only people on Earth. So it's
There
a
was
real puzzle. But they had cutlery. It wasn't from a box from Sheffield that had sort of got washed
Not
ashore.
an abandoned Ford Escort.
No, it was still 1818. It was just...
Oh, is it because the North Pole is magnetic and it... and all the cutlery naturally... When you...
What about...
You know when you lose a spoon, that's where it ends up.
Drifting shipwrecks.
No, you were closest with aliens.
Ah,
Was it
married?
meteorite?
Was it on the
Meteorites. Joe Brand points there.
Hey,
Yeah.
that's two I've got right.
3 meteorites. They looked like a woman sewing her tent and a dog to them, so that's what they knew them as. But they took flakes from the one that they called the woman, metal flakes, and they attached bits of horn and used them as eating implements, as cutlery. 70 years later, who was the first man to get to the North Pole, supposedly?
Was it Michael Palin?
It wasn't Michael Palin, no.
Ranulph Fiennes? I would have
No, we're
preferred
talking
it
about
as Rafe Fiennes.
1880.
1880. Queen
Yeah,
Victoria.
1880s. Man called Admiral Peary, an American.
Oh, Peary, I've
Peary.
heard of him.
Yes, Peary, there he was. He was a rather...
It was a Yeti.
He was a pretty horrific figure, actually. I mean, he went to these same people and stole their meteorites, basically, which they'd been taking their cutlery off, and
take some
sold them
kids
to a
as well?
museum for $40,000.
He took some children, didn't he?
Took some children. They took 6, of whom 4 died of TB instantly. And then one of them survived and was brought up by an American couple, was then horrified to discover his parents, his father, as a skeleton in the Natural History Museum in New York, on display, and complained, and Peary refused to do anything about it, but reluctantly gave him enough money to carry home. And it wasn't until 1993 that the remains of those Inuits were sent back to their homeland.
Horrific.
No, it was
so,
very...
did he know he was going to go and see his father, or was he just wandering around the museum and went, I know him?
Yeah.
That's awful.
It is. It's a horrible episode in the exploitation of a native people.
All of these things were done, I mean, in the name of sort of science, but also entertainment to a degree.
And in the case of
spectacle.
Peary, riches and ambition, he was psychotically ambitious. And now most people believe he didn't even get to the North Pole himself, because the story he tells that he would have had to have gone at a speed that no one has subsequently ever gone on Arctic exploration.
That's what I look like before I've done my bikini line. And...
It's a great look. It's a lovely look.
That beard's gone a bit mental as well. That's brilliant.
It is. Polar Eskimos made metal knives and implements by chopping flakes off 3 large meteorites that they called the tent, the dog and the woman. But now, a watery riddle. What are large, very large, blue, rare, slow-moving, have calves, right, suffer from wet bottoms...
Oh, look at Alan's face.
...and are found all over the world?
Not the blue whale.
You are right. You weren't falling for that
What were the pieces? Large, blue...
one. Large, blue, found all over the world.
Have calves.
Rare, have calves,
Wet
slow-moving,
bottoms.
wet bottoms.
You've lost me. I thought maybe a Smurf with an aneurysm, but...
But, I mean, that would be blue whales if it weren't for the slow-moving, but blue whales are pretty quick. They can go up to 30 miles an hour.
Well, I'm just going by the picture, but clouds.
No, they're not really blue, to be honest.
They're not blue?
Not
the bits in
really.
between are? That's
Yes,
sky, isn't
that's
it?
not clouds.
I knew that
We
was
had
one.
thought this through,
Is
yes.
it going to be a creature of some sort?
No, it's a phenomenon.
It's not to do with ice, is it?
It is so to do with ice, it hurts.
Is it a type of iceberg, Stephen?
Not an iceberg, though, no.
No, that's right.
So,
Correct.
Is this an ice flow, even though I don't know what that is?
Yes, you do know what an ice flow is.
Is it kind of a big
A glacier.
A glacier is an ice flow, exactly. You can share
Is
the
it a
points.
glacier?
Yes.
Oh,
sure.
my God. I nearly got back up.
There we are.
I'm doing my bit to save those. I've stopped eating the sweets.
Very good. They can be enormous. There's one 250 miles long, 60 miles wide, a mile deep. I mean, they're vast.
Calves? How do they have calves?
Well, the bits that break off into the sea are known as calves. It's called calving when they drop their bits.
It was a red herring for us,
It
wasn't
was,
it? You see,
really.
We automatically thought either something with huge calves or baby calves.
Yes, and the wet bottoms.
Ah, don't get me started.
That's when, in warmer climes, there are some which are almost not freezing. I mean, they're in 0 degrees centigrade, and they slide down, and their bottoms are warmer. The bottom, the underside, that's the bits on the Earth, is warmer and slides down. And they can go... What's the fastest you imagine a glacier is likely to go?
40.
40 what?
40 and a 30.
It might go a couple of inches or something in a year.
Well,
More than... I would say more
10
than
feet?
that.
65 feet a day is considered very rapid, but there was
inches is a bit
one
off.
in Pakistan that went 7.5 miles in 3 months, which is very
Must be
fast.
another word for a
Yeah.
glacier there, then.
Well, it's a racier glacier,
Racier
if you
glacier.
like. But amazingly, you get them all round the world, including the tropics.
Really?
Tropical glaciers, hello. Bit odd,
They're
but you
the
do.
fruit-flavoured ones, aren't they?
There's one on the border of Uganda and Congo. It's an equatorial, really, isn't it?
High up?
Yes, pretty high. Do you find life in glaciers?
Yes.
What
Oh,
kind?
yes. Smurfs.
You would find plankton underneath the glacier, perhaps trying to permeate the membrane of the glacier.
There's kind of red algae, and on the red algae, there's a creature that lives on the red algae, a kind of worm.
Wiggly worm.
An ice worm. A wiggly ice worm. It's a sort of annelid worm. There's one. Lovely,
yeah,
lovely
that's it,
picture.
What a life.
And yeah, it's an amazing life, but in one glacier alone, they found more of those worms than there are human beings on the surface of the planet.
Oh, good Lord, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
After they'd
stop
found a billion,
counting?
they just kept on looking.
Yeah, they kept on looking.
Another one! There's another one!
And another one.
Another one.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's another one.
Their ideal temperature is about 0. They freeze to death at -7, and above 5, they melt. They are quite like an ice cream in that regard.
I bet is that not delicious?
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Now, why are there no snakes in Ireland?
Sorry?
Oh, why are there no snakes
Oh, I know
in
this
Ireland?
because...
There's a reason that's related to the question I've been asking.
Something to do with the Ice Age?
Yeah, there were 20
the
periods of
glaciers.
glaciation in Ireland. It was just coming, they were withdrawing and coming, withdrawing, all these glaciers.
So there's no... You realise what we just said?
Yes.
You really can't help yourself, can you?
am sorry, but snakes
Why they're all
can't
Catholic
survive.
in Ireland?
Snakes can't survive with frozen ground. Anyway, we were talking about glaciers, and they're found all over the world, and they're large, and they're blue, and they have calves, but unlike the surprisingly nippy blue whale, they can't manage much more than about 60 feet a day at top speed. Now, the USA claims the legal right to seize territory wherever it might find what?
Oil.
Is it a street without a Starbucks?
Would it be... well, is it an American hostage or prisoner or something?
There is essentially a law which has never been repealed, a law that's 150 years old almost.
Is it the Ark of the Covenant?
No.
Is
It's something...
this involved in any sort of action film that I will have seen?
No, that it is involved in the plot of Dr. No. It's how Dr. No dies in the novel, actually. He's covered in this material that if it's found on an island that's unclaimed, any American citizen can raise an American flag and claim it. It's a kind of gold. It was as valuable almost as gold in the 19th century.
Silver.
No.
Nickel.
No, it's not a metal.
Tupperware.
It's not a metal. Not plastic. Christ. All right. You haven't read Dr. No. Does anyone in the audience know? Guano, they shout, and they are right. Points to the audience. Very
Guano?
Guano.
Is that a delicious drink that didn't really take off? No. What's guano?
Bird shit, isn't it?
Yes. It's the poo
Do I get a
from
point
birds
for
that have
that?
eaten a lot of anchovies in Peru.
What?
And it
You
was...
run out of your mind, man.
It was one of the most valuable products in the 19th century. It was a fertiliser that is unbelievably rich in nitrates and potassium and all the things that you need to double, treble, quadruple, quintuple the yields from land. So it was immensely valuable, and it created many, many millionaires and was responsible for 75% of Peru's entire economy. And it was a pretty horrific thing, as you can imagine, to mine, to excavate, open cast mining, because it dries like concrete. Really, really tough. So they used to do pickaxe and dynamite to get it away, and they had huge armies of essentially slaves and Chinese and convicts who would be hacking away at this stuff.
Do we still use it now?
It's an interesting point. I mean, the anchovy shoals are being used now principally for...
Caesar salad.
Sadly, if only they were, then they
Feeding,
might survive, but...
For feeding fish farms.
For feeding fish farms and for feeding chickens and all kinds of things in China.
It takes 5 kilograms of anchovies to produce 1 kilogram of salmon meat or farmed fish.
See, so
flesh.
people buy farmed salmon thinking that, oh, this is sustainable, it's good farmed salmon, but instead they're just using up enormous stocks of anchovy. Since 1856, the USA has claimed a legal right to take possession of islands where they find guano, birds' doings, you and me. The properties of guano were first discovered by the great father of geography, Alexander von Humboldt. Now, who taught Alexander von Humboldt how to speak the Ature language 40 years after the last person who spoke it died?
A confidence trickster.
A parrot.
Yes! Oh, Joe Brown!
That is good,
Brilliant! You are rocking. You are absolutely rocking. He was in Venezuela, Alexander von Humboldt, and he heard about this tribe that had been eaten by the Caribs, a cannibalistic tribe of the area. And they'd all gone, apparently, but someone said, no, there is a parrot who still is alive, that parrots can live quite a long time, and it knows...
How did it talk its way out of that?
It had 40 words in the language, which von Humboldt wrote down and learned. But, of course, we can't know how accurate it was. He was with someone who spoke a related language, and they made guesses as to what the 40 Ature words might be.
Sort of like, who's a cheeky boy, then? That sort of thing.
He would quite like that, because he was gay, Humboldt, funny enough, as it happened.
Well, I find that kind of stereotyping rather offensive. So you're saying that all gay people are like cheeky boys?
No, he might have quite liked to say...
When are you going to let up with your relentless gay bashing?
How many words can a parrot learn, do you know?
182.
That's good and specific. There have been some 200. But the odd thing is why they speak at all. Why is it that they do mimic humans?
It's they have that little thing in the back of their throat that I have where they can go...
But the extraordinary thing is no parrot in the wild has ever been observed mimicking another bird or another animal.
So
But
what?
there are birds in the wild
There
that
are
mimic
birds that do.
noises.
Yes,
and-
minor birds and other
Minor birds.
birds.
Yeah.
But parrots don't. In the wild, they just have their own screech and they're satisfied with that. They don't imitate other birds. They've never been observed to. And that is rather a shock, isn't it?
Do you have the answer to this? I hope so.
No, I don't.
You don't?
I'm sorry, no, it's a real question. They will imitate movements in the same way, you know, won't they, like that? If you lift your left leg, they will lift their leg, or your hand, or whatever. They'll imitate what you do physically, yeah. They like to do that. It just amuses them. It seems to amuse them, at least. But 40 words of this language that von Humboldt spoke may seem very few, but the fourth best-selling children's book of all time has a vocabulary of only 50 words. Which would that be?
Oh, is it the Da Vinci
Janet and
Code?
John.
Is it not a modern-day book, and it's a classic?
It's a 20th century classic.
Oh,
I'll read some of them.
Is it a Dr. Seuss book?
With wood you will try, tree train, they not on or
Oh,
rain.
it's good, isn't it?
Say, see, so thank, that, thee, them, there, and anywhere. And I'm going to give it away. Eggs, Sam,
Yes,
ham.
that's
Oh, yes,
I just
Dr.
said Dr.
Seuss.
Oh, you
Seuss.
did, yes, absolutely.
You ignored me.
No, no.
Green-
I was
green
carrying on reading, I heard it.
Green eggs and ham, or
That's
whatever
right.
it's called.
I do
You
Yeah.
didn't say the title of the book. I would have then said brilliant, but... No. So Humboldt apparently learned ature from a parrot, which leaves us plummeting over the sheer cliff of general ignorance, so fingers on buzzers for a quick-fire round. What do Mongolians live in?
They call something like yak. It's like a yolt or a yak.
Do you mean a yurt?
Oh!
Yes, that's the one. No, that's not the one.
Yeah, thanks, Rob.
No. Yurt is a Turkish word, and Mongolians would not be pleased if you called their gur, which is what they call their little tents,
Well,
a
I
yurt
won't
at all.
then.
No, indeed, now we know. They don't call them that. And it's where they live, and it means home in Mongolian, really. Where in Holland is the Dutch city of Groningen?
Is it not going to be in Holland? Is
It's
it
not in Holland.
It's another one of the Netherlands. Or something.
Yes, you're very smart. There are two provinces called Holland, and they're both south of where Groningen is, there you see.
So there's two places called Holland.
Yeah, the country's called the Netherlands. And there are two areas of it called the Hollands, North Holland and South Holland, in which Amsterdam, The Hague, Rotterdam, all the big cities are. But that part there, where Groningen is not in Holland, it's in the Netherlands. That's
The photo you showed looked like Guildford, didn't it?
It
It
did
did
a
that
bit.
famous shot of Guildford.
Yeah.
That could be Britain, couldn't it? So easily.
It almost-
if it didn't
yeah.
have a big sign saying Groningen.
That really was the clue there, I felt.
Yeah.
That's the giveaway.
They have a pub there that claims to have been open non-stop for 10 years.
So indeed, it could be Britain.
Exactly.
Are you
Exactly.
suggesting we have more in common with our European neighbours than otherwise?
I'm suggesting the world is becoming homogenised and indistinct, and I, for one, think that's a bad thing.
Yeah. Right. There you
We
go.
all think like that.
Yeah, we
We're
do.
all the same.
Yep. There you go. Yes, Groningen is in the Netherlands, but it isn't in Holland, which refers only to the two western provinces, an eighth of the country's total landmass. Us calling the whole country Holland is a bit like them calling Britain East Anglia, which would be nice, but they don't. What is quite interesting about Church Flats Farm in Derbyshire?
Is it to do with the height above sea level?
No, but you're so much in the right area.
Is
it
it
the height
not
below sea
flat
level?
and it hasn't got a church there?
Well, no, it's not that
Is it
exactly.
the highest flat bit? The
No,
highest
but it's
flat
the
area?
sea. Think of the sea. You're in Derbyshire.
Oh, I know what it is. It's the point in Britain that is the furthest from the
Yes.
sea. But yes, I've got it, Alan.
I won't have you competing for Sir's favour. You're both very good boys.
Isn't it something like 72 miles? You can't be more than...
Exactly. Well, 70 miles is nowhere in Britain is more than 70 miles from the coast, which perhaps makes Church Flats Farm in Derbyshire the very middle of the country. Anyway, which language is the Spanish national anthem sung in?
Well, I'm going to go for... This is Spanish.
It's not. I want to see to Catalan, is it?
Catalan.
Is it Catalan?
Is it Castilian?
Well, that is Spanish, really, isn't
What
it?
was
It
the-
still is classic
the
Spanish,
royal
but
kind
it's
of-
not.
Sorry, Stephen, can you just
Representative.
remind me, what was the language that guy was taught 40 years after it died out by power?
It's not that one.
Rock
no.
all.
I didn't say anything, don't be aggressive.
Is it instrumental?
Yes is the right answer. Well done. It has no words. It's very odd. They have one of the oldest tunes called La Marcha Real. It's the only national anthem with no words. The old ones were dropped after the death of Franco in '75, but then they were inspired by visiting Liverpool fans, listening to You'll Never Walk Alone, which is a song from an American Broadway musical, bizarrely, called Carousel, but for some reason...
Hey.
I know.
Don't talk rubbish.
It is.
You couldn't look any more scouts.
So the Spanish Olympic Committee held a competition in 2007 to replace the words of their Franco-fascist one, but they were withdrawn after 5 days, having fallen foul of several Spanish regions. They criticised the new version, which was called Viva España, unfortunately, for being too nationalistic. I know.
A national anthem.
Yeah, for a national anthem. But the words were, long live Spain, we sing together with different voices and only one heart. Doesn't seem that terrible. As opposed to the Marseillaise, do you hear in the countryside the roar of those ferocious soldiers? They come right here into your midst to slit the throats of your sons and wives. Which is quite aggressive. Or God Save the Queen has the 6th verse. Well, I don't know if you know that.
Of course I know the 6th verse to God
Is
Save
that
the
the
Queen.
one where...
Give us.
Well, I have to sing it all the way through.
Yeah.
The one about going up to Scotland and killing everybody.
That's the one. Lord grant that Marshal Wade may by thy mighty aid victory bring. May he sedition hush, and like a torrent rush, rebellious Scots to crush, God save the king.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But perhaps the oddest ones is back to our old friends the Dutch here. This is the Dutch national anthem. It's still the Dutch national anthem. William of Nassau, scion of a Dutch and ancient line, fair enough, dedicate undying faith to this land of mine. A prince I am undaunted, of Orange ever free, to the King of Spain I've granted a lifelong loyalty. In the Dutch national anthem, they say they've granted a lifelong loyalty to the King of Spain.
The most deferential anthem
Yeah.
ever heard.
It is bizarre. I mean, 350 years ago, Holland was part of the Spanish Netherlands, but that's a long time ago. The Spanish national anthem is the only one which officially has no words. They did try and write some, and they were rejected for being too patriotic, which brings us to the scores, ladies and
Quietly
gentlemen.
confident.
Heaven bless my soul. I don't know how this could have happened, but in last place with minus 28 points, it's Rob Brydon. And just behind him with minus 21, Jimmy Carr.
So sort of a winner. Sort of the first of the winners.
Who can it be? Who can it be? Who can it be? In second place with minus 10 is Joe Brand. And he breasted the tape at the very last minute with an impressive minus 7, Alan Davies! So it only remains for me to thank Rob, Jimmy, Joe and Alan, to wish you all safe onward journeys. And I leave you with this from Ambrose Bierce. War is God's way of teaching Americans geography. Good night.
And you can now catch up on the entire first series of QI with this BBC DVD, which is available now. On the way next, it's Mock the Week Christmas special.